What's up, guys? Chen here. Welcome to another episode of Hoonigan Autofocus. We're going to talk about 510s today with Randy Jaffe. This is his amazing Datsun and Nissan collection. But you have, out of this whole collection, you have 3 510s here. 2 of them I know you own. One of them is Nissan's, but all 3 of them are very special.
Yeah, they're, as I said in our other video, they're the nasty little girls. Some people come over here and they want me to start these every once in a while, and they're just the gnarliest sounding little nasty little girls, and they're amazing cars in themselves. I mean, they were 2-door. I mean, excuse me, but John Morton and all those guys back in the day, they used to call these shit boxes. They were shit boxes. They raced against the Alphas. They raced against the 2002s, but they basically said it's a 3-box car. You got a box in the front, a box in the middle, and a box on the rear. And as a $2,100 showroom car, it was just a generic hubcap white wall tire car.
Yeah, it was over $1,000 cheaper MSRP than the 240Z, correct?
It was actually a $1,400. It was $1,400
yeah,
cheaper.
$1,400. But this is kind of one of the things that I always bring up in these videos. If you guys watch Hoonigan Autofocus, you always hear me talking about the pedestrian car, and this is, as those guys said, it's the shit box, legitimately, because it's a box, but it's a pedestrian car, and honestly, it was never meant to look good. It was never, it didn't have a design.
No, it was a utilitarian car, and the interesting thing was, so Peter Brock and Mr. Katayama decided to race the 46 240Z and the number 3, the blue-white car. So at the time in the showrooms, you couldn't get a 240Z. There was a year wait. There were people that specifically said, I want a silver car with black interior, and they get a call and go, well, we have a blue one with blue interior, and if you didn't take it, they kick you out of the line and you go to the end of the line. So you couldn't get these cars. So after Peter Brock and John Morton won 2 national championships with the BRE team, which was stocked with Mac Tilton and Trevor Harris and John Caldwell that built all these motors. They all went out to, and John Knepp, who started Electromotive. They all were iconic people that started with BRE. So after they won the 2 championships in the 240Z, Peter Brock went to Mr. K and said, why are we racing a 240Z? The whole idea is to win on Sunday and sell on Monday, but we can't sell any of these cars because there's a wait. So Mr. K, Peter Brock's pretty smart. He's a designer, he's an enthusiast, he's a motorsports guy, but he's damn smart. So he and Mr. K started talking, and they said, what car do we really want to launch in America? Because it was in that category of Corollas or whatever Toyota was. I guess that was the entry Toyota at the time, I guess, yeah. Corolla. And so basically, they just said, let's race the 510s. And I have some pictures that I found in the 1972 archives of the LA Times that literally show, or Peterson Museum it actually is, and they show Peter Brock and them building a 510, and it was a white car with white wall tires and hubcaps, and it was a $2,100 car. And then you see the 46 car that they had already built next to it. It's literally like Superman gets in the phone booth and turns around and comes out all jacked up and in a cape. I mean, it's an amazing car. If you watch, which Rob Fuller and I have watched 1,000. I mean, by the way, his nickname in Atlanta for years here was Rob 510. But he and I both have watched Against All Odds, not the one with Jeff Bridges and whoever else was that hot girl that was in there, but the Against All Odds with John Morton, and driving this car for 2 years in the Trans Am series. The Trans Am 2.5 series only lasted 2 years. And some people say because the second season John won with 4 races left, and basically it was non-interesting at that point. But the first championship in 1971, they actually did not win on race day. They won on Monday after a protest because Horst Quick and the Alpha team, they had actually thought they had to cheat to beat the BRE team, and they had 3 extra gallons of gas. And Peter Brock, and you see him in the video, slapping the car going, there's no effing way they could have done that, because those guys knew exactly how far they could go on a tank of gas. So in 1971, John Morton actually doubled, and BRE and Nissan double dipped Datsun. They double dipped, so they won the championship at Road Atlanta with this motor in the Z car. And then they turned around the Trans Am and won in the 46 510 that's down the road. from these cars. So they double dipped in 71 and then came back in 72 and won the second championship. But this particular one, or
let's start with this one.
well, that's the most iconic 510 in the world. So this does not belong to me. This is Nissan's car. It sits in the Nissan Heritage Museum. They stay in the Lane Museum. And those guys, Dan Pass and Jonathan Buehler and Dave Bishop, who just retired, and Jeremy Stillwell used to be with them, and now Jeremy's moved on to Rivian. But those guys have been taking care of this car for a dozen years or so. Dan and Jonathan just took over that program when Dave retired. And I had this car in my shop, I think 4 or 5 years ago, and just to help them out, because they have a whole warehouse full of cars, and they really, it's really a thankless job that they have to take care of all these. So when we were at ZCon this past summer in Nashville, I volunteered to bring the car here to go through the mechanicals, do some PDR work on it that didn't happen on the track, and just get the car the best it can be and see where it is. And we've just completed all that. So they're nice enough to leave it here in the heated, air-conditioned environment, and that's what's important for these older cars. But this car came off the track in 1972 after the last race at Riverside, and it literally, other than the Monterey Historics 2001 that John Morton drove it, and 2010, this is exactly how it came off the track. There's a little bit of a mar right here. I think this is where John and Vic Edelbrock got in a little contact in turn 3, I believe, at Laguna Seca. And other than that, everything, all the patina you see on the car is the way it came off the track. This car was painted by Dave Kent. And Peter Brock always told me about him, and this is airplane quality paint. It's amazing. I mean, if you could feel it, it's super slick. So, all this is hand painted.
This is the thing that a lot of people don't understand. There wasn't really a way to do decals on here. You couldn't just go to a vinyl guy and it's like, hey, cut me all this vinyl. You actually had to paint this on, because it just, maybe it did exist, but it would have been something
It
where...
was so specialized that you couldn't do it on every block. You had to find the special guy. The guy that painted this, they called him Hank the Brush. So Hank laid all this out and hand painted all of this. So the first year this car ran, right here it did not say Simonized. It said BRE Datsun like my Z has. And then Simonized stepped up the second year and wrote a big check, and they got the big transporter, and I have the notebook with all the plans, how they built that transporter. And so they changed this livery. So some people will see, well, here it is right here. If you see the 118 car, the BRE Datsun on the rear, that's the way they ran the car in 71. In 72, Simonized came to the party, wrote a check, sponsored them, and that's why you see Simonized here. On the front lip, they changed it back and forth between BRE and Simonized, depending on what pictures. So BRE in 1971, they built this 46 car, and John Morton helped build this car. I've got the same, all the railing and all that tubing down there holding the seats is the same that I have. Actually, it's still in the Parkinson car that had all the 46Z parts. So they built this car. They built the number 35 car that Mike Downs drove, and he still lives in the Bay Area. I think he writes murder mysteries or something. So he drove the 35 car, and then they built a number 68 car that was gorgeous. It was dark blue with a white hood, and that car was their guest car. So Peter Gregg drove it, Fitzy drove it, Jim Fitzgerald. Who else drove it? Forbes Robinson drove it, EFR. So they rotated that. Bob Sharp actually drove it in one race. So 4 or 5 very famous race car drivers drove their guest car. And then the 35 car, the 35 car actually turned in for 2 races. They closed up the 3 and made it an 8, and Bobby Allison drove it at Laguna Seca and Riverside. They built those 3 cars. Then they built 2 for customers. They built 2 cars that customers came to them and said, we want to do club racing. Those 2 cars, Adam just got the second one. Adam Carolla is actually restoring the yellow-white one. So there was actually a total of 5, 2 for customers, 3 for racing. And this is the one that is the top of the food chain.
So do you know why, off the top of your head, was saved versus a lot of the other cars?
Well,
Like, because as you said, pretty much with most of the cars, including that
Roadster?
the Roadster, it was sold and then somebody else raced it. And
The crazy thing about this car is, and John Morton's actually told me this, so Dick Roberts was in charge of Datsun Racing. Okay, Dick Roberts and Peter Brock, they were, you got to remember, Peter Brock back then was a competitive guy, raced himself, and he and Dick Roberts didn't see eye to eye on a lot of this, and I've heard a lot of stories. And at one point, it may have been based because somebody in Dick's family wanted to race and Peter got the contract. It could have been something like that, but it's all hearsay at this point. The bottom line was, at one point after this car raced, Dick Roberts had ordered this car to be crushed.
No! No!
John Morton told me, he said, he told them, he said, please don't crush the car. I'll hide it in my garage or anything, but please don't crush the car. So it ended up, I guess Dick Roberts took heed, it ended up in the collection in LA for all those years, and then it got moved to Nashville. So, from an enthusiast, for a guy that grew up idolizing John and Peter and Datsuns and everything, for me to actually have a hand in helping keeping this car the best it can be is just, it's a dream come true to help.
I love the
Keep it like
tech
it is.
stickers. It's funny because the 2010 one looks a lot older than the 2001 one for whatever reason.
No, when I got the car 4 or 5 years ago, those stickers had actually lost their adhesive, and I found them under the seat, so I took some clear shipping tape and wrapped them around there to save those, because to me that's part of the history.
How incredible.
Yeah, it's
yeah,
really-
that's one of my favorite things when I look at old race cars. I love seeing all the old tech
Yeah,
stickers.
there's
Yeah.
the birth date plate right there, still in there. So it's a 70, it's a 71.
Yeah,
So the really cool thing is when I got this car 7 or 8 months ago to help them, the tires were old back from the 2010 historics. So this past summer, the COVID summer, I shipped the 21 car out to Laguna Seca for driver appreciation, and John drove it for me, but he was really under the weather. He couldn't even drive. He was sick. So he drove that car with these tires, and the tires only have 10 or 12 laps on them, but they have John Morton DNA. So I put them on this car because it needed tires anyway, and I don't know, I'm kind of weird like that. I just felt like John drove the tires, John drove the car. And we went through the mechanicals the other day, and Gary at Braille Batteries was nice enough to donate a Braille battery, so now it's got a Braille battery. You don't have to worry about that. It's always a hassle keeping 75 or 80 cars in the Nissan Museum and keep them all charged. The hand painting
it's
on
really
there.
evident here.
Oh, it's incredible.
And honestly, it's kind of amazing to me how much shine and how good the paint is after all these years.
Well, I have a guy that helps me. I love detailing my own cars. I've done it. I helped put myself through college. I worked at a grocery store and also detail cars. And I still, when the car comes off the track, the 46Z, everybody knows, leave him alone, let me go do my thing. I just enjoy it. And when this car got to me, I have a guy that works at G-Technic. They're local here. And Eric runs G-Technic, and Carson works for him. And Carson is a wealth of knowledge with all the chemicals. So he helps me do just the initial polish and a little bit of the sealant, and then I go back and just rub on them all the time. I mean, this thing I've probably put 20 coats of it's called C2. It's a serum that's it's a coating that's just
ceramic.
It's a ceramic spray wax. Oh, it takes 5 minutes to do it, but it's just amazing stuff.
Yeah.
So this car has so many layers of that on it because I just want the car to be the best it can. I mean, it's one of John's favorites, and John's other half, Sylvia Wilkinson, who's written 27 books, she's amazing. I mean, both of them are outliers, but she's just so youthful, and she calls this the cuter than a Beagle puppy car. But it's got a sinister look on it. I mean, if you get down low and look at the nose of this thing, it's badass.
It's interesting because I look at it, and because of how clean it is, it looks like it was fully restored.
No, it's not at all. We just, I spent a lot of hours, Carson and I did, just not really bringing the paint back, just making it the best it could be. I mean, the paint is the airplane paint. When I talked to Brock 6 months ago, he's a very good friend. We email all the time. I feel like I can call him at any time. And when I told him I had it in my warehouse, and I said, this paint is pretty, I mean, it's easy to work with. And he goes, Randy, Dave Kent painted that with airplane paint.
Wow.
So it's just, it just looks, it looks so good. And the products they use today, they didn't have back then. So I just want to thank Dan and Jonathan and David Bishop to just have the wherewithal to have some Datsun geek like me that want to help take care of it. I'll you know, if they needed to go to shows or whatever, I'll be glad to help them out.
It's crazy to me in this day and age. You can still go to Las Vegas, you can go to BRE, and you can visit Peter, and you can get an actual lip.
Oh yeah,
From him.
Absolutely.
You know, that's actually where I bought my mirrors, I bought my little ducktail, and I bought the air dam. I got two because I know I'm going to scrape one
Oh
out
yeah.
really bad.
Well, Peter always tells me he's always proud of the little details and additions. Like the Z-Car rear spoiler, he liked his second iteration because it went a little bit further out to the body. And most everybody else had him the one they stopped. Now the Rocket Bunny made on that one, see how it comes out further?
Right.
That's what Peter liked. He thought it
Yeah.
was more, it hit more air. So Peter's, I think this one's on the Ratsun, it comes all the way out. So that's
Yeah.
his second iteration. But this car is just the history of this car.
Can we take a look at the engine bay?
Absolutely. Just what this car embodies. And it was so funny. So the guy that built these motors, John Caldwell, who built my motor that we put in the Bonneville Flats car, I asked him when this car got back over here this time, about 6 or 7 months ago, I said, if I send you pictures, can you tell me if this is your motor? And he goes, absolutely. And I said, really? I mean, I guess an engine builder knows when he looks at it. So after John Caldwell left BRE, he went on to build engines for 30 years in racing. And so there was a guy named Ray Gruss that came on board to do the motors. So I sent him these pictures and I detail pictures, and he goes, yep, he goes, that's my motor with Ray's details on them. And I said, hey, wait, will you see what Ray did? He goes, oh yeah. He goes, he just knew everything about the car.
What's some of the things that he
He
recognized
didn't
right
specifically tell me, but he could just tell from the catch cans were all original. They were all fabbed up. A couple things had changed. Like the original radiator on the Z cars, just like I have in the Rocket Bunny, were actually the Corvette Harrison radiators. So this one, I believe, was updated when he raced at Monterey, just because the radiator was so old. But look at all these catch cans. Here's a couple things we had to do last week with Michael. We took Worth 2-part epoxy and it was sweating a little bit out of the neck, and we don't think it's the caps, but we just want to make this thing and preserve it where it runs for a long time. We tried on all these race cars, when they go to shows, I mean, if they're always just straight race cars and they're just always on the track, you don't have to worry about them cooking. You know, you can keep them at different, these cars actually, mine runs on the track. Last time I did a track day, it was 90 degrees outside, and that thing was running like 140 degrees, which is cool. But this thing, I've done so many shots on the track with this car, and the Z car and this one, they just cook. I mean, I'm just staring at the temperature gauge, and to have all that anxiety, I was telling the Nissan guys, maybe we ought to try to put an electric fan in here like we did on the Z. It'll snap in, snap out. But unfortunately, there's an oil cooler up here, and there's only 2 inches between the pulley. So we're trying to figure something out, because this car is never going to race again. It's just, you know, like John always says, he said, you know, it's the way it came off the track. You'd hate to wad it up like we did my Z at Daytona. But we just got to be very careful when you take this thing to shows not to cook it.
Yeah, incredible. You know, one of the things I love seeing with these old race cars, can I just open this?
Sure.
Is just how simple
That
they
weighs
were.
nothing. Oh, when I first started rebuilding the 240Z, I was asking John 1,000 questions, and John Morton said to me at least 100 times, he goes, Randy, this is very simple cars. You know, this is not like building a GTP car or a 300ZX turbo. I mean, he said these were so basic, but they were really what put him on the map. He said they won, they outperformed the competition, but at the end of the day, I mean, look at this thing.
It's
just so basic.
Simple. It's just this one panel, right, that has all the gauges and everything on it. They just cut the dash, right? It looks like.
Yes, and that what you're looking at there, that's a 12,000 tack. And I talked to John literally last week about that. And I said, well, somebody pegged that thing at 10 something. He goes, well, he said, what happened is when you pegged it, that the actual red needle sometimes just kicked way over, so it wasn't. Nobody. He said we never shifted that high. So
Right,
we went to like 8,000. But he just said, I just love that tack.
Just like the stock Z's, right? The
Oh yeah,
tack
they
is
just
like,
go.
they just go all over the place. Yeah.
Exactly.
You don't actually know where.
But the amazing thing about these tacks is they're direct drive right off the cam. So I did this car the same way. So when you look at the back of this, valve cover, that's a direct. That is a Jones Matrola tachometer directly to the back of the cam. That's how all these BRE cars are. This one's the same way. If you want to shoot that, see the back of the.
Okay.
So that's the tack driven right off the cam. Now what's funny, we'll look at the Bob Sharp car in a minute. That car, they ran a longer cable and took it off the distributor.
Interesting.
You could do it either way.
Huh. But like the thing that always blows me away is
the
like
little
the
headrest.
headrest is so funny. It's just like this little round dot.
You know, it's crazy. And see these two holes right here? Well, there's a picture on the How to Modify Your Datsun. There's two versions of that. And John Knepp, before he passed away, who owned Electromotive, I asked him, I said, what was this in the picture? It looked like a air scoop. He said, Randy, we had when Morton clarified it last week, it was a horn, a carb horn, like for a throttle body. And they just had like the horn was mounted here, the intake, and they just had a tube of air running in the back of John. I mean, it's as basic as you can get.
Yeah.
And the holes are still here, and John said he put that on. He basically built these two cars, I mean, with the whole team, but John was a fabricator. He first started working with Aviate oil pans, and because the Z's cars started smoking the very first time they put them on the track, and John fixed that. But there's a metal tube or aluminum tube going through the middle of the car for the fuel lines. But look how basic this car is.
It's so basic.
And it's just it's a screaming little bitch on the road. I mean, all three of these are just, their sound is incredible.
Can you start one of these for us?
Sure. And then this is a Roadster 5-speed box, because in '71 they didn't have all those other. The Z's didn't have a 5-speed until '77. So these are Roadster, which is a conventional H pattern, whereas the other race cars we use is a first gear down, dogleg. And then this is really cool. Let me sneak by you here. So in the Trans Am 2.5, they had to do pit stops, obviously. These races were anywhere from 110 to 150 miles. So they had this encapsulated fuel tank, and they had this filler neck outside the car, and then this is an actual pull piece to let air, so it took fuel in faster.
Way. And it's just like this little.
It's pretty cool looking.
Right.
You know what's funny? When I talked to John Knepp, the late John Knepp and Morton, a lot of these catch cans, they went over in El Segundo and bought the stuff from like salvage yards. This wasn't, I mean, some of them they fabbed up, but some of them were they're airplane parts. Those switches on the dash that have that little luminous dot on the end of the switches on the dash, those are aircraft switches.
Ah.
And of course, that's what Braille just donated to the Heritage Museum for this car, one of their batteries, and hopefully this will be a 15-year battery, the lithium. It weighs nothing, and you know, the guy, Dan and Jonathan and David have to always worry about batteries, so it takes that out of the equation to have this. But it's so simple.
Yeah.
And then they had the fire bottle back here, and then they had the vented, there's a vent right here for the gas tank.
No way.
Yeah.
So cool.
So what I just learned last week that I didn't realize, when the car was up on the rack and we were doing the fluids, you can't really see it down here, but this has a cutout. This has a cutout right here.
Uh-huh.
And one of the guys that works at Michael's shop said, that's an exhaust cutout. And I said, it sure as heck is. So I called Morton and I said, why is it? Because I've never seen anything but that on this car.
Yeah.
And he said, Randy, the very first race, we had the exhaust coming out of here, and somebody protested. So he said, we ran the exhaust out here for the first race. That's it. And he said that was in New Hampshire, the first race.
It's amazing he
And
remembers all
well,
this stuff.
John, it's crazy. I used to call John Knepp, who basically was in charge of putting the whole car together. And like in the 46Z, it has the diff temperature gauge, the 46 race car. And since it's at Rob's shop, I got to show you this. And that's this, we copied it. But they had this, and they had this momentum switch here. So I called John Knepp one day, because all these parts were on the blue-white Parkinson car back there. And I said, there's a switch in there. And he goes, oh, that's a momentum switch. And I said, well, the guy working on the car was wondering why, this didn't really draw a lot. And John Knepp goes, Randy, a lot of little draws is a big draw. So he said, we just wanted to check the temperature in the pits and cut it off. So which actually those cars were sprint races, but they still checked them when they stopped and wanted to know if they needed to cool them off. These were the cars that had pit stops and fuel and added fuel.
So have you driven this one?
I've driven it at a couple years ago. We were on the track, and I've moved it around at the track. Most of the time, before Jeremy left to go to Rivian, Jeremy drove this car, and I drove my Z car. And one of the coolest things we did at Monterey in 2018, the Nissan was the Mark at Laguna Seca, and we had the best time. It was it'll never be. There's some of these iconic pictures with all of us on the track. If you want to take this picture here.
Yeah, I've seen those pictures.
I mean,
and it's just
this. If you're a Datsun dork, this is about that. That'll never be.
Yeah.
That'll never happen again. And unfortunately, the famous Frizzell car, who's owned by a friend of mine, David Martin, just passed last week, and so we're grieving for his family. But so that's the 510 sitting there in the middle, and so the people from Rolex, because they sponsor the race, they came to me and Jeremy Stillwell at the Nissan Heritage Museum and Steve Millen with that 75 car and said, I want you three guys to come with me. Let's do 6 laps. Each of y'all, we need 2 laps up front. So we did that, and I think that's one of their pages now that they have on for the WeatherTech. But it was so cool to be out on with this car, the Steve Millen 75 Le Mans winning car, and my car. That's us right there.
amazing. Let's talk about these 2 cars now.
So this car is a that's a 1971. This is a 72, and this is a 72. This car was a race car by this couple, Larry and Dee Edwards, out of Newport News, Virginia. Lived there for a long time. I think they lived in North Carolina as well. Apparently, Newport Datsun must have bought them gas and tires for the car, and thus the name was on the side. But I've got pictures all the way back in the early 70s, and it was pretty much painted like this. And what's really funny is BRE was on the front of the car, because even since they won the championships, it's amazing. Even Glenn's car, his 240Z, the Bay Area Datsun car, yeah, it's painted in the Vips livery now, but he just had an accident where I think he's going to take it back to the 45 number 45, the livery. But they ran a BRE on the front because they were such an iconic company.
Yeah.
So this car did run that, and it's just, I mean, it's an amazing.
So you actually drive this car?
I drive it at track days. Yeah.
Amazing.
I've got almost not many, maybe 3 under my belt. But it's all, Troy Ermish helped build this with Glenn, because Glenn was going to have this for a long time, but he wanted to find, see this series, the 2.5 Trans Am series, there's only, I think, 9 of these left. And when Glenn found one of the Trans Am cars, the number 37 car, he said, Randy, do you want this? This ran B sedan. So 510s ran B sedan or Trans Am. And it's a nasty little bitch.
So like how much power does this thing make? Do you know?
So what's interesting, I was telling Tyler a little while ago, so these motors from the factory were 1.6 liters. So this car in 1971, the BRE car, it ran a 1.6. The 35 car ran a 1.8. If you ran the 1.8, which this did in the second season, you had to have a weight handicap bar in the trunk. And I think Peter Brock's son actually found it after years in Peter's warehouse, and actually Peter has it again. It's just a big, heavy weight bar. If you ran the 1.8 and you went up 0.2, you had to run the handicap. So these motors, when they were in the 510s from the factory, made about 85 horsepower. Well, these motors, this is a Rebello motor, and David builds a real strong motor. These cars are about to the wheels, they're about, I'd say 185. So you're
No way.
100 horsepower. Oh yeah.
That much?
And these things don't weigh that much. So yeah, these motors right here are basically 100 horsepower, and I'm sure the 85 was probably at the crank back then. So let's just call it at least 100 horsepower more than the factory was getting out of them. But that was based on a 1.6, and this is a 1.8. Some people use the truck motor that's out of my 620 over there, the L20Bs, but most of the racers like these things, the 1.8s zing up a little bit better, where the 2 liters will be a little bit better down the straight. But for the most part, this is how people race B sedans today with a 1.8.
And then it weighs under 2,000 pounds?
I believe we weighed this one, it was right at 2,000. I think with me in it, it was 2,090.
It's still so light.
Yeah, they're for the horsepower. I mean, this is unbelievable, but my buddy Michael, I've mentioned a couple of times here, that owns Vintage Racing, we had another seat in there with a chatterbox. And he races 911s. He's raced with Patrick Long and those guys. He knows what he's doing in a race car. And he was impressed. He goes, man, he loves this car.
That is hilarious.
I think the guy that owns or runs the Porsche 901 shop in Florida, I haven't met him, but I think he owned a 510, and a girl out of that shop now races it. It was in Indianapolis in the SVRA event. And it's just people start to really like these things now. They're fun.
All right, so tell me about this one.
So this, I was just lucky. I'm lucky that this ended up in my hands. It was actually offered to Rob, and at the time, Rob, it didn't make sense for Rob, and he called me. He said, "You're the only one that I want to have this car." So Rob was nice enough to pass it off to me, which thankfully it's in my hands because I love the car. So this was one of 3 Bob Sharp 510s. These 3 510s were the first time that Bob Sharp ever used the red, white, and blue scheme, because their early 510 and their Z cars were like a candy burgundy red with white numbers. So this is the first 3 cars that got painted, and then after that, all the other cars got painted. They're red, white, and blue. So this is Fitzy. So Jim Fitzgerald, this is Fitzy sitting on the grid. You can see all the stickers and decals are the same in the solid blue on the sun visor here. So Bob Sharp made his was made first. It was number 33. The 38 car was made second, and the Paul Newman car, number 75, was made third. There's a picture of the 75 car if you want to catch it in a minute. So Bob Sharp won the B sedan at Road Atlanta Championship in his number 33 car, and basically retired at his house in Connecticut. And then in 1973, Paul Newman was on the front straight at Road Atlanta and tail slapped it into the wall and just wadded it up and totaled it. So Bob called somebody at his dealership back in Connecticut, said, "Go to my house, get the 33 championship car, and bring it down here to Road Atlanta." So they real quickly put a 75 on the door. Newman is the only one of the Bob Sharp that finished. He finished 6th. Fitzy in this car had a tire blowout. He ended up backwards down in the turn 12. And then Bob Sharp was actually driving a 610, and he didn't finish. So Paul Newman was the only one that finished, but it was really the 33 car. And then John Baldwin has that car today in Louisiana, and it's painted in the Smith black and silver livery. But this car is all the interior, all the
I have to point out, this is so archaic, or this is so crude, but it
all
works.
Of Bob Sharp's.
It's hilarious.
It's like, crazy.
This is kind of like what you were saying about on the 46 510, they had to drill the 2 holes for a vent.
For air.
I love that they still retain the stock vent.
They use the stock vent on it, and what's crazy as these cars progressed, like when you get to there's 300ZXs, those came off because I'm sure they used them, but they put the mirror either under it or on top of this, so they had them stacked, the mirror and the vent. But you know what's crazy? John Morton said he drove one of Bob Sharp's cars one time, and he goes, I said, "Did you like it?" He goes, "This was bullshit." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because all the asbestos came off the brake pads and went right in my face."
Oh my God, but there's a filter here.
But it went, he said it was all, John said, "I got out of the car and I was covered in
No way.
And that was, all the brake pads were made out of asbestos.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
That is crazy. I mean, what an insane
But if you look
story.
at all the Paul Newman videos, the 280ZX, the 300s, all of them, he's got this pointed to his face, and most of the time this was above, I believe, and the mirrors were all below it. They used, a lot of times they used the mirror like it's on the Rocket Bunny, the Hella 4000.
Oh, yeah.
You could see it from here.
Yeah.
And they put it underneath here. But this, this seat, a friend of mine came over here and he recognized this seat that was made by a company in the Boston area.
Jeez.
And that's the original battery box. And of course, we got a Braille in there.
But look at
Yeah,
that.
the sharps.
How cool
All
is
that was still with the car.
No way.
And so this one, the tachometer is driven off of the distributor.
Oh, can we take a look at the motor?
The other day, so these lug nuts, when you look at the picture, these lug nuts are extended. So when I picked up the car, it didn't have those lug nuts. So thankfully, a friend of ours that races on the West Coast, Dave Stone, he has I think it's a quad championship, Bob Sharp 33 car. He's got the Dave Frelson 510. I mean, he's got an amazing collection. And he had a guy actually make these. But I think it was Sunday, I got a text from the guy I bought this from a couple years ago, and he said, he had a picture and he said, "Randy, I found these, do you want them?" They're the original steel lug nuts for this car, so I'm jacked.
No way. Just these
This
stories.
one, it's funny how the companies changed. Like BRE did not use any of this stock prop rod, but Bob Sharp did. And all of I forgot the guy's name, Bob told me, so they call that the reservoir, the mailbox, because it looks like a mailbox.
Yeah.
And they anodized all that stuff red. And this catch can over here is anodized red. And this catch can, all this stuff they just fabbed up. They had this, and there's that Harrison radiator again that all of them ran.
Dual
And
oil filters.
the dual oil filters. Bob Sharp, but they all use those BRE
Oh, how cool is
adapters.
that?
Yeah, people use those. They sold them.
That is amazing.
Yeah. But see, you can see the tack is
Yeah.
driven around here and comes right here. See the connection
Yeah.
to the bottom of the distributor.
It's interesting to see the three cars from the same era built different
They're all
ways.
built- yeah,
and
they're
like
all-
this one doesn't have fake headlights either. It's just I guess for more oil cooling, right, on this side.
It was oil cooler over there. Most of the time they all put them there, except the BRE ones up front here. So I'm not sure why they did that. The interesting thing is when I drive this car on the track, I was amazed at how cool. It's almost like too cool. I called Rob and Troy after I had this on the track a few times, and said this thing's running like 140, 150 degrees. And Troy goes, I think Rob said the same thing. I think that's a little cool. They should be running nothing below 160.
Yeah.
But that's why I think all these pictures of this car had duct tape.
Oh.
Had duct tape on there. They were trying to get. They just ran cool on the track. But what's amazing is you start these cars now, they get hot quick. You got to get them out there. So this car, I snuck a electric fan in here because this goes to some shows. This was actually, as far as I know, I don't remember seeing another one. This was on the grass at Amelia Island this past year, and Jim Fitzgerald. We've said this on another video. Jim was known as Fitzy, and he was the lead instructor at Road Atlanta. He won multiple championships, and he won over 350 SCCA races. So his daughter MJ and I have become friends, and Mary Jo, she's so nice. She races motorcycles with the 38 on it, of course. One race team's trying to get her back into a car, but she was really pleased to see this car after so many years. She hadn't seen it since she was like 15 or 16 years old. But I'm just glad it's in this form. It's still in one piece, and because there's a lot of these cars, like the 68 guest car that BRE built, and the 35 original car. They went to Costa Rica or San Salvador, and they're poof, gone.
Who knows? Can you start one of them for
Sure.
us?
Which one do you want to?
I don't know. Which one starts?
They all start.
Which one?
This one, the battery's not hooked. Let's do this.
What's the easiest one? Because I don't want to trouble you.
Here, I'll start the 21 car up.
Okay. That is so loud. Oh my God. I can't believe how loud that thing is.
For a four-banger, it's crazy.
Jeez.
And you should hear it under load.
Yeah, well, 185 horsepower. Jeez. There's no graceful
Easier on
way
that
to
side.
do that.
No. You got to be a spider to get out of there.
Holy.
They
like
all three sound exactly the same.
there's no way that would pass the 85 decibel Laguna Seca. You couldn't even drive.
It has to be on open day.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Blown away.
So as a tribute to Peter, because he always painted his headers and exhaust yellow, this one has the yellow exhaust. I asked Peter one time, I said, why did you do the exhaust yellow? Does it mean anything? He goes, silver and black are boring. When you look up under there, it's nice to see them.
Yeah.
And that's where the original ones off the 46Z
Right.
are all right there.
Huh.
Those are pieces of art.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for showing us this. Just so much awesome racing history over here. And it's awesome that Nissan is tasking you with keeping this in tip-top shape. And also, it's cool that you still drive these. Have you driven that one on track?
Not on track. It actually just went to, we were at Amelia when the first week of March, when COVID hit. We were lucky we even finished that event. That could have gone either way. And since then, basically so many things have been shut down. But
yeah. Are you going to drive that, you think?
I'll probably maybe just do some test days and see. But as far as racing, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it'll honestly just be cool just to see it on track. Forget about doing wheel-to-wheel racing, but like just driving.
No question about it.
Yeah.
I mean, what I'd like to do if we do race Laguna Seca this summer. I'm not sure if the Z car is going to be there or not, but if it is, it's always cool because John and Peter are always there. If Nissan allows us maybe to bring this out under the 46 trailer,
Yeah.
and have it all together. And I just like it where people come up to John and Peter and they get their autographs and they've seen these people, but they're both so down to earth. I mean, John is
super cool.
John is as humble as one can be.
Amazing. Well, thank you again for showing us part of your collection. You have quite the extensive collection here. Yeah. See you guys in the next video.